I'm 50, a single mom, and I just had the strangest, most surreal birthday of my life. One I don't think I'll ever forget. It started off totally normal. My daughter, Emily, she's 23, insisted we do something big this year. I wasn't sure I wanted a whole party, but she was so excited. She planned everything: food, music, decorations. She even tracked down old friends and coworkers I hadn't seen in years. But what really caught me off guard was the surprise guest. My son, Luke. Luke is 25 and has been living in another state for the last 3 years. We talk, but not as much as I'd like. He's always been independent, quiet, and honestly a bit distant since college. I chalked it up to growing pains or just life being busy. He told me he couldn't make the party because of work. I was disappointed but didn't push. So when he walked in midway through the evening with a huge grin and a big bouquet of lilies, my favorite, nearly burst into tears. Everyone clapped. I hugged him so tight. It felt like the best gift anyone could have given me. Luke smiled, looked around the room, and said he had one more surprise for me. He was bringing someone with him, a girlfriend first, or maybe a friend I hadn't seen in years, but it wasn't either of those. It was a boy, a teenage boy, 13 or 14, standing awkwardly behind Luke with his hands shoved deep into his hoodie pockets. Then at Luke, and that's when he said it, calm, casual. It was just another fact. "This is Jason. He's my son." And the entire room went dead silent. For a second I thought I'd misheard him. Maybe he said godson, or stepson, or something else. But the way the boy looked at him, then at me, told me everything I needed to know. Jason was his son, my grandson, a child I'd never heard about, never met, never even suspected existed. The air in the room changed. Everyone was quiet, pretending to sip drinks or check their phones, probably trying not as shocked as I felt. Emily dropped the stack of napkins she was carrying and just stood there frozen. I could see her brain trying to process the news as fast as mine. I turned to Luke, still smiling like this was some cute surprise, but I wasn't smiling back. I asked him, flat out, how long he'd known, how long he'd been hiding this from me, from all of us. He said Jason was almost 14 now, which meant Luke was just 11 years older than him, which made no sense. I blinked and stared at the boy again. Jason looked nothing like his father. Not exactly. But the more I looked, the more I saw the pieces line up. Same nose, same eyes when he tilted his head just so. I didn't even know what to say. I walked out of the room without a word. The thing is, I raised Luke alone. His father left when he was 5, and I did everything I could to make sure he grew up with structure, love, and support. We were close. I thought we told each other everything. I thought I knew my son. But now, I was looking at a 14-year-old boy that no one knew existed. Emily followed me into the kitchen, whispering that she was just as confused, that Luke had never said anything to her either. Then she told me something else, something I hadn't realized. Luke didn't bring a partner. No mom, no co-parent, just the kid. And Jason looked uncomfortable, like he wasn't sure if he even wanted to be there, or if he knew the full story. Back in the living room, Luke was chatting with some of the guests like nothing happened, like he hadn't just dropped a life-altering bombshell into my birthday party. That's when I started wondering, was this really a surprise for me? Or was this his way of easing himself into a truth he hadn't had the courage to say out loud before? And if so, why now? I didn't go back into the party right away. I stayed in the kitchen, pretending to wash dishes while my heart pounded. Emily paced next to me, just as rattled. We were both whispering like we were trying not to wake a sleeping baby, though the truth was much heavier than that. I asked her if she had any idea. She swore she didn't. She told me she hadn't even heard Luke mention a serious girlfriend in years, let alone a kid. And now? This? Eventually, I pulled myself together and went back out there. People had gone back to mingling, nervously sipping wine and pretending things were normal. But the energy was different. The quiet, kind of awkward. Luke and Jason were sitting off to the side, on the couch. Luke looked relaxed. Jason didn't. I sat down across from them, and that's when I asked, quietly, just enough so the people around wouldn't hear. I asked Luke who Jason's mother was. He told me her name was Vanessa, that they'd met in college. She was 2 years older than him, a TA for one of his classes. It was a short, messy thing. She got pregnant and didn't tell him until Jason was already 3. By then, she'd moved across the country and was raising him on her own. She only contacted Luke when she got sick, really sick, ovarian cancer. That was 4 years ago. And Luke? He'd been flying back and forth ever since, helping out, getting to know Jason little by little. I was stunned. I asked him, why didn't he tell us? His answer still rings in my ears. Because I wasn't ready for anyone to see the person I'd become. I didn't even know what that meant. Emily looked just as confused as I felt. I pressed him. What do you mean? What person? He hesitated, then said something that made my stomach turn. I've made a lot of choices I didn't think I'd have to explain. That was it. No detail, no apology. Just that cryptic sentence. And Jason? He just sat there, hands clasped, eyes glued to the floor. I didn't push, not in front of the boy. But inside, I was boiling, because this wasn't just about keeping a secret. This wasn't about surprising me at a party. This felt like the beginning of a much deeper lie unraveling, and I could feel it. The worst of it hadn't even come out yet. The party fizzled out fast after that. People made polite excuses and filtered out. A few friends hugged me tightly on the way out the door, but their eyes said everything. They were dying to ask questions. No one did. I think they all knew I was too overwhelmed to offer any answers. Emily helped me clean up while Luke and Jason disappeared upstairs. Apparently, Luke planned on staying here, in my house, without asking. He'd brought an overnight bag. Jason had a duffel, too. Like this was some weekend getaway, not a bomb dropped on my life. I kept telling myself to stay calm, not to make a scene in front of Jason. The kid looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. But the audacity of Luke just waltzing in, introducing his secret son, and acting like he was doing me a favor, that didn't sit right. Once the house was quiet and Emily went home, I finally sat with it. The silence, the weight. There was a child upstairs, sleeping in the same room where Luke used to play with toy dinosaurs and tape glow stars to the ceiling. Now he'd brought a kid of his own, a kid I didn't know existed until 6 hours ago. I barely slept. At around 2 a.m., I went to the kitchen for some water, and that's when I heard it. Voices, from the back porch. I crept closer, careful not to make noise. Luke and Jason were out there talking. I couldn't hear everything, just bits and pieces. But what I did hear, it cracked me open. Jason said something like, "Do I really have to call her grandma?" Luke laughed, then said, "Only if you want your cut." Jason, "She doesn't even know yet." Luke, "Exactly, so don't say anything until I do." Cut? Of what? My hands went ice cold. I stepped back before they could see me. That wasn't a casual father-son chat. That was something else. Something calculated. Something I wasn't supposed to hear. And in that moment, standing barefoot in the hallway at 2 in the morning, I realized I wasn't just being introduced to my grandson. I was being set up. I couldn't sleep after that. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, replaying their conversation over and over. Only if you want your cut. She doesn't even know yet. What were they talking about? By morning, I was exhausted and on edge. Luke and Jason were already downstairs when I got up, acting like it was just another Sunday. Luke was making pancakes, like he used to when he was a teenager trying to charm his way out of trouble. Jason sat at the table scrolling on his phone, barely acknowledging me. I tried to act normal. I didn't want to raise alarms until I knew exactly what was going on. But the tension was thick. Every time I looked at Jason, all I could think was, what did Luke tell him? What does he think this is? Then something strange happened. While Luke was distracted, Jason asked if he could use my printer. I asked why, and he mumbled something about homework. I pointed him to the office upstairs. About 10 minutes later, I heard the printer going. Only, it wasn't just one sheet. It was printing a lot. I quietly crept up the stairs and stood just outside the office. The door was cracked. Jason wasn't printing homework. He was printing legal documents. Pages from a scanned PDF with my full name on them. He didn't notice me at first. His back was to the door. But I saw the heading at the top of the last will and testament of my full name. My stomach dropped. I pushed the door open and Jason jumped, clearly startled. He fumbled to close the window on the screen, but I'd already seen enough. The PDF was still open behind a dozen minimized tabs. I didn't say a word. I just asked, coldly, where he got that file. He froze. Said Luke had sent it to himself a while ago, that he thought it was okay. That it was just in case. Just in case of what? I didn't explode, but I think the look on my face said it all. Jason muttered an apology and practically ran back downstairs. That will? I drafted it 6 years ago, after my health scare. Emily and Luke were both listed as beneficiaries. I had it saved on a password-protected folder on my old laptop, which Luke borrowed during the pandemic when his broke. I never thought twice about it. Now I couldn't stop thinking about why was Jason printing it? Why did Luke still have it? Why did they mention a cut? My brain was spinning. My hands were shaking. Whatever Luke had planned, it wasn't just about introducing me to his son. By the time I walked back downstairs, my entire body felt like it was humming. Not from fear. Something sharper than betrayal, confusion, a cold realization settling in my bones. Luke looked up from the stove and asked if I wanted pancake. I didn't answer. I just sat down at the table and looked at Jason, who suddenly couldn't meet my eyes. I told Luke we needed to talk, alone. He followed me into the laundry room, away from Jason, away from open ears. I didn't waste time. I asked him why his son was printing my will, why he even had it, why there was a conversation last night about cuts, and whether Jason had to call me grandma. I laid it all out. No anger in my voice, just facts. And the moment I asked, Luke's entire expression changed. He didn't even bother pretending. Instead, he leaned against the dryer, arms crossed, and said, "Because I didn't think you'd ever do the right thing unless you were forced to." I just stared at him. He went on to explain, almost casually, that he had financial issues, that Jason's mother's medical bills had wiped out any savings, that since she passed last year he's been supporting Jason completely on his own, and things were getting tight. That's when he said it. "You've got money sitting in savings, Mom. You own this house outright. You've got retirement. That small inheritance from Grandpa. I'm just saying, we both know you're not going to need all of it." I was stunned. I felt like I was talking to someone I didn't know. I asked him flat out, was he planning to contest my will? To take legal steps now, while I'm still alive? He said no, but he hesitated just long enough that I didn't believe him. Then he gave me this rehearsed little speech of how family takes care of each other, how he never asked me for help before, how he was trying to introduce Jason in the most meaningful way, but knew I'd never accept him unless he made it impossible to ignore. That this birthday was the perfect opportunity to fold him into the family. Fold him into the family? I asked him, voice trembling, if he seriously thought the first time I met my grandson should have been at a public party full of strangers, without warning, without even a private conversation beforehand. He shrugged and said it wouldn't have gone well any other way. That I'm not exactly flexible with surprises. That's when I realized he didn't come to celebrate me. He came to test me, to see if I'd break or bend. If I bent, maybe the next request would come easier. Maybe the paperwork would slip into conversation next. Maybe I'd start feeling guilty enough to rewrite the will. But I didn't bend. I didn't say a word. I just walked, and he didn't follow. The rest of the day felt like moving through wet cement. I went through the motions, washed a few dishes, watered the plants, answered some belated birthday texts. My head wasn't real. How could it be? Luke stayed quiet. Jason barely came out of the guest room. I think even he knew things had gone too far. Or maybe he didn't care. I still couldn't tell if he was just a kid caught in the middle or a kid being coached. I kept thinking about that line, only if you want your cut, over and over. Luke didn't deny saying. He didn't deny any of it. And somehow, that made it worse than if he'd yelled or tried to cover it up. This wasn't a heat-of-the-moment mistake. It was deliberate. Late in the evening, Emily came back. I hadn't told her everything yet, just that something felt wrong. She walked in with a bag of leftover cake and a fresh anxiety in her voice. Apparently, a friend who was at the party had texted her something odd. The friend had overheard Luke talking to one of my old coworkers in the corner of the room, saying things like, "She's got it all saved up. Once the paperwork's updated, it's game over. Game over." He said that, like this was a playbook, like I was some final boss he had to outmaneuver. Emily was furious. She wanted to confront him right then and there, but I stopped her. I told her we needed to be smart, that we needed to wait, watch, listen, because suddenly I had a terrible feeling this wasn't about money anymore. It was about control, and the scariest part? And sure, Luke was doing this alone. That night, I didn't sleep. Again, Emily stayed over. We took turns checking the hallway, whispering theories in the dark, ridiculous, like something of a thriller novel. But every time I tried to talk myself down, the printer scene flashed in Jason's face, Luke's voice saying. By 4 a.m., I was sitting in my office with my old laptop in front of me, the one Luke borrowed during lockdown. I opened it. The password had been changed, not just the lock screen, the entire admin access. I tried every version of every password I've used for the last 10 years. Nothing worked. Even the backup USB I had hidden in my filing cabinet, where I kept encrypted versions of my will, bank statements, and property records, was gone. Completely gone. I checked the drawer 3 times. It wasn't there. That's when I really felt it. The snap inside me, like something invisible had finally broken. This wasn't just about my will. Luke had been going through my files. God knows for how long. Emily sat next to me in silence while I processed it all. She reached over, gently touched my hand, and said, "Mom, he's already planning for you to be gone." That sentence chilled me, because even if he wasn't doing anything illegal yet, he was clearly preparing for something. I decided then and there, I wasn't going to sit back and wait for the next hit. I was going to act before he did, before the game turned into something I couldn't control. The next morning, before Luke and Jason were even awake, I made a call. Not to Luke, not to the police, to my lawyer. He's a good man, quiet, methodical, has known me since I was 29 and going through my divorce. I told him everything, well, almost everything. I didn't mention the late-night whispering or the cut comment. I just said my son had accessed private documents without my consent, and that I no longer felt confident in the terms of my will. His tone changed instantly. He asked if I had reason to believe Luke was planning to take legal action against me. I told him I wasn't sure, but that I needed to make changes anyway. We set an emergency meeting for Monday. I felt lighter after hanging up. Not good, but focused, grounded. Emily made coffee while I locked the office, set new passwords, and began backing up files. This time to an encrypted cloud server only I could access. I was done being naive, but the moment I stepped out of the office, Luke was standing at the end of the hallway, just standing there. No Jason, no pancake smiles, just arms crossed, face blank, eyes locked on mine. He asked if I'd been going through stuff. I told him yes. Then I asked a question I wasn't sure I wanted the answer to. When were you going to tell me she died? His eyes didn't flinch. He said Vanessa passed 6 months ago. 6 months. That entire time I had been sending him birthday cards, messages, small money transfers, still playing the role of the proud, clueless mother. And all the while, his life had completely changed. He became a single father, moved homes, changed jobs, and never once called. He told me he didn't want pity, but it wasn't pity he was after. Not really. It was positioning. And now that Jason was here, sleeping in my guest room, eating at my table, printing my documents, it was clear that whatever guilt Luke once had was long gone. He didn't bring his son here to heal. He brought him here to inherit, and he was just waiting for me to make the first move. Monday came fast. I met with my lawyer that morning, alone. I sat across from him in a quiet office with beige walls and a too-loud clock ticking behind me. I signed a new will, had every clause reviewed, adjusted the beneficiaries, removed Luke's name entirely, not out of spite, out of self-preservation. The truth is, I had always assumed my kids would be taken care of equally, that they would protect each other when I was gone. That blood meant loyalty. I never imagined one of them would try to outmaneuver me while I was still alive. After the meeting, I picked up a few groceries and drove home, calm, collected, and certain I was done. When I walked into the house, Luke and Jason were at the kitchen table, eating breakfast like nothing had happened. Luke tried to make small talk. I cut him off. I told him I knew everything, that I'd heard the conversation on the porch, that I saw Jason printing legal files, that I knew the USB was gone, that the laptop was locked, that I wasn't stupid. His face went pale. He tried to talk, but I kept going. I told him I'd already spoken to my lawyer, that everything was secured, that he no longer had access to anything with my name on it, and then I asked him to leave. He didn't fight. Not really. He looked like a man who'd already seen the end coming, but hoped I wouldn't notice. Jason stood behind him silently, arms crossed, that same glazed-over look he'd worn since the moment they arrived. Like this wasn't his first time watching his dad burn a bridge. Luke asked if he could come back to explain someday. I told him that day wouldn't come soon, not until he could look me in the eye and say he was sorry, for real, not as a strategy. He left without saying goodbye to Emily. She watched from the stairs, silent, holding a mug of cold tea, and just like that, my house was quiet again. But it didn't feel like peace. It felt like grief. I keep wondering what kind of man my son has become. What part of him believed I'd roll over, or be too soft, or too old to notice? And if I hadn't heard that conversation, would I have missed it? Would I have let him rewrite the end of my story, without even realizing it? I don't know if I lost a son, or just finally saw who he was all along. All I know is, my 50th birthday was the day I became a mother again, but this time, to myself, and I won't be caught off guard ever again. Update. Emily checks in every day. We're closer now than we've ever been. As for Luke, no word. But Jason made a burner account and followed me on social media yesterday. His profile picture? Him alone. No dad in sight. Maybe one day he'll reach out too. Maybe he'll want something different. Maybe I'll be ready to listen. But not today.